Okay, so I know there are a lot of people who would be a lot better at sharing this message than I am, but for one reason or another, right now you're kind of stuck with me. It's my hopes that what I'm about to share with you will eliminate tragedy for thousands of vulnerable people and ultimately lead to solutions and greater happiness for all of us. Some of this is going to be hard for some of you to hear. Some of you are going to have to rethink what you know about attorneys and maybe some parts of your religion. Remember, truth and knowledge walks on the path of light. They are not hidden in darkness. So, here's the deal. Imagine a region where every type of attorney is an imposter state attorney. Imagine these imposter attorneys secretly being able to falsely inflate a client's bill by thousands of dollars. Imagine if they can do this to the living, what can they do to the dead? Imagine imposter attorneys secretly being able to falsely inflate a client's bill by tens of thousands of dollars if the client commits suicide or dies in another way. Imagine a female desperately in need of a protective order after many threats are made against her, and an imposter attorney purposely misinforms her about protective orders for women just so he can secretly bill her $5,000 for it. Imagine homeowners being forced to sell so imposter attorneys can secretly collect tens of thousands of dollars in falsely inflated legal bills. Imagine imposter attorneys posing as collection agents and being able to secretly manufacture one case after another to collect thousands of dollars from anyone they choose as they devastate them with months of confusing paperwork. Imagine imposter attorneys collecting thousands of dollars from one client after another, then purposely leaving each client high and dry months later. Imagine imposter attorneys being allowed to abuse drugs and alcohol before client meetings and in and out of courthouses without there being any real state agency to report them to. Imagine all this is happening in a region where some of the worst rates of statistics, including prescription drug abuse, child abuse, bankruptcy, financial fraud, suicide, and murder-suicide, go hidden year after year. Imagine you or someone you know lives in this region. Make no mistake, all this is an insidious reality for the families and individuals that make up Utah's population of 3 million. If you can imagine these things or worse, it is happening in Utah because several decades ago, a group of attorneys who were also lawmakers decided that there should be no state supervision of all attorneys in Utah. This way, unsupervised imposter state attorneys could secretly target members of the population in destructive ways and exploit hundreds of millions of dollars a year from them without anyone stopping them. To provide the illusion of state supervision for attorneys, the deceitful lawmakers deceptively created a confusing private corporation and purposely gave it a confusing name. That name is Utah State Bar. Then they got all the political and legal offices, newspapers, university law schools, and other media in the state to refer to it as the Utah State Bar. As a confusing, secretive private corporation, Utah State Bar is not funded by the state of Utah like other legitimate state offices are. Instead, Utah State Bar's $2 million per year payroll is secretly paid for by the 6,500 imposter state attorneys it provides the illusion of supervision for. This creates a problem for the state of Utah because for the past several decades, other legitimate state offices have also issued licenses for other legitimate state licensees, but those offices have also supervised their licensees. This includes real estate, mortgage, and insurance state license holders. This is not the case for Utah's legal licensees known as attorneys. This contributes to why the many layers of collusion that allow this corruption in Utah will stop at nothing to keep it hidden. This all means that in reality, Utah State Bar really is nothing more than a corrupt multi-million-dollar PR firm secretly allowed to pose as a state enforcement office. Nowadays, this means that Utah's unsupervised attorneys are secretly allowed to break the banks and backs of more than 10,000 Utahns every year. Maybe they first did this decades ago so they could secretly target and exploit vulnerable minorities in destructive ways. Either way, victims aren't always disguised as clients. There are indirect victims they target as well. In instigated filings for protection, custody, collections, evictions, divorces, and more, Utah's unsupervised attorneys are secretly allowed to misinform, instigate, and lead any unsuspecting person into unbearable and tragic nightmares for years and years, so that above all else, the unsupervised attorneys can collect one fortune after another, even though it is the direct cause of thousands upon thousands of tragedies piling up year after year. From the governor's office down, this fraud alone should be enough to send many people to prison for the rest of their lives, and it should result in the state of Utah being on the hook to its population for decades of untold pain, suffering, and loss by simultaneously creating and breaking this fiduciary duty to its population. Tragically, though, it all gets much worse because this corruption involves many more layers of collusion throughout Utah's political and legal offices. Right now, Gary Herbert is the governor of Utah and has been so for the past 12 years. Like other governors before him, he also refuses to investigate the many layers of corruption that allow this. The longer he does this, the more that shows about what he is trying to hide and the involvement of the Mormon-controlled governor's office over the past several decades. That involvement also includes the Mormon-controlled offices over the years of the Lieutenant Governor, the Utah Attorney General, the Utah Judiciary, all Utah judges, the deceitful Utah State Bar and all its unsupervised member attorneys, mediators, and custody evaluators, as well as another courthouse office known as the Utah Administrative Office of the Court. This courthouse office is the secretive group that coordinates how Utah's corrupt and rigged courthouses operate from corrupt day to corrupt day. To do this, this corrupt office creates imaginary and complex lies for Utah State Bar's unsupervised attorneys and Utah's corrupt judges to use. This includes purposely forcing extra courtrooms to sit vacant day after day so Utah State Bar's unsupervised attorneys can all show up in the same courtroom at the same time and begin billing their victims disguised as clients hundreds of dollars an hour for what they claim is waiting time. Because Utah's corrupt judges were once unsupervised attorneys too, they wait on the attorneys they favor the most and they call on them last. They do this so the hundreds of unsupervised attorneys they favor the most can actually wait around the longest, double billing, triple billing, or doing nothing, and ultimately bill the most for that waiting time. This often adds up to unsupervised attorneys collecting more than $1,000 for what was really just another illusion of a 5-minute hearing secretly designed to result in more illusions of more hearings month after month after month down the road. Utah's corrupt judges favor certain attorneys more than others for a wide range of reasons. This may be because they went to the same Mormon-controlled law schools at the University of Utah or BYU, or because they have lots of friends and interests at the same Mormon-controlled law firms. This all means that every year, tens of millions of dollars in falsely engineered courthouse waiting fees and double and triple billings, and who gets to collect on them, is secretly controlled by Utah's corrupt judges. The deceitful Utah Administrative Office of the Court also allows loopholes that Utah State Bar's unsupervised attorneys can secretly use to further instigate their victims disguised as clients, to gain a colluding judge's ear, or in the pursuit of other dark tactics. In pro se cases, Utah State Bar's unsupervised attorneys pursue these dark tactics in unconscionable ways. While in some states, pro se means one thing, in Utah, for the past several decades, pro se has secretly meant that a vulnerable person of any race has been unknowingly groomed by the courthouse's secretive and dark hands into naively believing that they will be heard and treated fairly if they attempt to represent themselves regarding the false filings instigated against them by Utah State Bar's unsupervised attorneys. All this reveals that above all else, it seems to have become the goal of every unsupervised attorney to instigate as many random filings for as long as possible and to collude with other unsupervised attorneys in using cheap, willing paralegals to secretly collect one fortune after another from their endless, ongoing list of victims disguised as clients, regardless of the tragedies that follow. A case closed is a client lost is a perfect motto for the deceitful, private, imposter corporation deceptively known as the Utah State Bar. Tragically, even the safety and well-being of Utah's children is ignored by the unsupervised attorneys in this pursuit. This often leads to even greater tragedy and, of course, more random filings. Whether they are drug abusers, mentally deranged, or literal hounds of hell, this is a self-regurgitating cycle of metastasizing hemorrhages that Utah's unsupervised attorneys gorge themselves on day to day like stray dogs to each other's vomit. What kind of patterns will emerge when the many layers of collusion allowing this corruption are investigated? How many self-righteous, Mormon-controlled Utah-based law firms are purposely, directly and indirectly adding to a person's suffering, hoping a suicide will happen so they can secretly collect on another falsely inflated fortune? If you know a Utah attorney who claims to be a good person or to be honest with their fellow men, as Mormonism claims to teach, then this is a great opportunity for you to invite that person in taking part in demanding legal reform in Utah. If they refuse to do this, then maybe it's because they are one of the many unsupervised attorneys who will be going to prison or losing their imposter state legal licenses for the rest of their lives when the investigations are finished. At least now you know that it's a fortune of blood money that pays for all those cheap paralegals you are constantly forced to talk to, as well as the months and months of international vacations, mansions, lavish parties, luxury cars, gargantuan wedding diamonds, and other gluttonous guilty pleasures you've heard of. Now you know why so many culturally critical groups continue to look away year after year as hundreds of millions of dollars in falsely inflated legal fees are secretly collected and celebrated by the dark hands of Utah's unsupervised attorneys, corrupt judges, and tragedy after tragedy continues to pile up. Another group of culturally critical offices in Utah that continues to fail Utah's population by purposely looking the other way is the ongoing group of men who have all been related by blood or marriage and who, for most of Mormonism's 195 years of controversial history, have secretly held Mormonism's 15 key leadership roles. This includes Mormonism's 3-member First Presidency and its 12-member Quorum of the 12. Insidiously adding to the dark secrets of this controlling extended family of Utah men is that a member of this extended family is also Utah's most senior judge. This is the rogue judge Robert Faust, who is the son of the famous Mormon leader, military veteran, unsupervised Utah State Bar member, and namesake of the Mormon-controlled University of Utah's Law Library, the late James E. Faust. The rogue, unsupervised Judge Robert Faust is notoriously known among vulnerable segments of the population for colluding with Utah State Bar's unsupervised attorneys, making up time-consuming imaginary procedures during hearings, stomping on the rights afforded to critically vulnerable people by the U.S. Constitution, ignoring basic math and critical calculations, and giggling with unsupervised attorneys during critical hearings involving children. Because in Utah, judges are nominated by the Mormon governor, and because Judge Robert Faust is the son of a famous Mormon leader, the people who perpetuate the collective imagination of Mormonism in Utah, including the Mormon-controlled Utah Judicial Conduct Commission, will stop at nothing to keep up appearances by whitewashing report after report of Judge Robert Faust's wanton abuses of the bench, no matter how devastating they continue to be to the families, critically vulnerable people, and children of Utah. Even though Mormonism claims to be the only true religion on earth, claims that all other religions are false, and that Mormonism's 15 leaders are chosen by Jesus Christ, Mormonism continues to have lie after lie revealed about it by myself and others. Yet, all the roles of Utah's critical, legal, political, municipal, and educational offices, as well as its public and private media offices, continue to be operated by puppetized victims of Mormonism's lies. As thousands upon thousands of tragedies continue to pile up year after year, this means the collective imagination of Mormonism will continue to look the other way indefinitely. This also includes local Mormon-controlled offices of the FBI, the Federal Trade Commission, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and others who have all been made aware in detail of the many layers of collusion contributing to this corruption, and they continue to ignore it. Because of this, there needs to be special investigations by the United States Senate into the deceptive, imposter, private corporation known as the Utah State Bar. Just like there have been special investigations into other corrupt corporations around the USA. The state of Utah needs to be on the hook for creating and breaking a fiduciary duty to its population that has contributed to untold tragedy, irreplaceable lost time with loved ones, and endless financial devastation for hundreds of thousands of people over many decades. Many people from the governor's office down to the bench need to be sent to prison for the rest of their lives. Many of Utah State Bar's unsupervised attorneys should be sent to prison or lose their legal licenses for the rest of their lives. There needs to be state supervision of attorneys in Utah. During the very first meeting between an attorney and a potential client, there needs to be pages and pages of upfront disclosure. For their part in these illusions, the operations of the University of Utah's S.J. Quinney College of Law and BYU's J. Reuben Clark Law School should be suspended indefinitely until these many layers of corruption are rooted out and prevented from ever happening again. Whether they are drug addicts, mentally deranged, have giant holes in their heads, or are literal hounds of hell, it is because of the abuses of the following unsupervised Utah State Bar member attorneys that this whistleblowing report has been compiled over the past few years. This includes Jay Barney, Kara Barton, Marco Brown, Steve Christensen, Nicholas Gottwald, Patricia Latulipe, David Maddox, Karen O'Brien, Richard Plen, Velvet Poston, Spencer Ricks, Allison Satterley, and Virginia Sudbury, as well as Judge Robert Faust, retired Utah State Courts Director Richard Schwirmer, Governor Gary R. Herbert, Lieutenant Governor Spencer Cox, Attorney General Sean Reyes, and there are many more names to come. Perhaps the behavior of these angels of death will further reveal a peculiar mark of another cult on 33 corrupt private corporation imposter state bar associations that are secretly allowed to be government-granted monopolies deep inside the USA's 50 states. After all, 33 divided by 50 is 66.6%. As a harrowing reminder of how real all this is, you might have noticed that I've chosen to post some recent media links to tragic events in Utah. In these suicides or murder-suicides, all were victims of the collective imagination that drives the secretive dark hand of the many layers of Utah's evil, rigged courthouses in one way or another. In incidents of suicide by cop, rather than seeing a cop killing a still innocent person, please know that what you are really seeing is one broken Utahn killing another broken Utahn because of the day-to-day statistics and tragedies we have all been subjected to for decades. When the many layers of collusion allowing this corruption affecting all of us is finally rooted out for good, so many people from all walks of life in Utah will be able to be so much more in so many ways. This will contribute to more rewarding experiences for all of us. Because social media groups are easily manipulated and I don't have the time to keep up with all of it for now, I'm just going to include an email address for those of you who want to throw cash at this to create support groups and get as many billboards and lawn signs up as possible, as well as for communications about demonstrations at the Capitol, the courthouse, Utah State Bar's offices, and other places. I literally have a whole village planned to peacefully occupy the lawn of the Utah State Capitol until this corruption is rooted out and these tragedies stop. Also, consider writing my name in for governor during this year's ongoing election. A simple MJ ought to do the trick. Maybe I'll get elected and I can get all this fixed sooner than later, because each day this is allowed to go on is another day of tragedies piling up. If the many layers of collusion allowing this corruption hasn't brought tragedy and devastation to your own life or the life of someone you know, the question isn't if it will, but when it will, and at what immeasurable costs. As you explore ways to express your emotions during this alarming time, please remember that as Utahns, Utah's brave law enforcement force of thousands of men and women, as well as its dedicated military members, their families, and their children, are not immune to these tragedies or statistics either. With that, I'll just say good luck, God bless, be smart, stay alive, and peace out.